welcome to episode 13 of Spill the RT. Hello, Josh. How are you doing?
Hello, Eamonn. Episode 13, folks.
I know.
13!
It's
Oh, my goodness.
Lucky number 13, though.
It is. Well, it's very lucky. Well,
Yes.
first of all, we have to say congratulations. Eamonn got engaged last week.
Oh,
so
dear.
congratulations.
Putting
Yes.
all my dirty laundry out onto the table.
You knew I was going to do that. Come
Oh,
on. This is
no.
Spilling the RT. So congratulations for you. Well done.
Thanks,
well
Josh.
Done.
Oh, sure, look.
And this week, in addition to a wonderful guest, we have some pretty amazing stories, folks. We've got nudists in French museums. We've got $2 Mark Chagall. We've got Princess Leia's bikini for sale. You'll never guess how much it went for. Freed Russian artist. And we've got, what's the last one? What is the last one? Oh, Stonehenge.
Stonehenge. Well, it is quite forgettable, in fairness. Well, that's what we hope we don't do. But you'll find out more about that. But for now, let's head on over to welcome Christina Geoghegan. Christina, come on down.
Welcome to the show.
Welcome to the show, Christina.
Very much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming on.
Here.
So today we will talk about all of your practice and what you've been up to recently. Straight down to that, what we're going to do is get straight on with the show. So, Josh, where are we heading first?
So we're heading to the Museum of European and Mediterranean Civilizations, which is acronym MUSEM, which I think is perhaps the worst acronym ever decided on for a museum of any kind. It sounds like your phlegm. It's like basically what that sounds like. These folks are doing an exhibition of nudism, and you're allowed to come to the exhibition nude yourself. They are saying the 21st century nudism, it's not about the 60s anymore, the 1960s, that is. It's about 60 years later and embracing the nudist lifestyle and an embrace of the outdoors. How's that?
Oh, well, it's not just at the beach then, I suppose. What I found this little picture, I thought it was nice and cute just to highlight this experience and what that could potentially be like actually in a gallery space.
More than 600 paintings, photos, films, magazines, sculptures, and objects are in the show. So you wouldn't be naked by yourself. You would be literally in surround sound, surround vision of nudity in all its shapes and forms.
Is that supposed to make it feel
better?
better?
I think the sheer scale of it means that you might remember the first 10 pieces and maybe the last couple, but you'll probably get nudity fatigue, which people might find hard to believe.
Mm.
That actually might be a good thing, right? I mean, I guess one way to break down the barrier against nudity in public life is to make it so around us that we just simply, it just becomes like white noise.
True. I'm curious about the objective of the piece, though, because like most new movements, they are normally against something or for something. And like the Germans, the nudity was reintroduced to 19th century Europe through Germany, opposed to industrialism and the idea of returning to nature. So is this a retrospective, or is it trying to encourage the next movement within Europe or further normalization?
It is dedicated to living naked and charts the history of nudism over the last century, particularly in France.
It's about freedom, Christina.
The museum wants to make it clear that, quote, nudism isn't just a fad out of the 60s. It goes hand in hand with the search for healthy vegetarian diets and the use of natural therapies, meditation, and yoga in the open air.
Absolutely.
You go!
Embrace your inner skin. Bring it out to the forefront and exhibition yourself out.
I'm in California, right? I was introduced to naked hot tubbing many decades ago. I had never heard of such a thing before I moved out here. So I have nothing against this per se, but I certainly do not want to do it in a museum. I draw the line there, I think.
And
well,
usually,
the Finnish on their saunas are quite notorious, since you will be nude in a sauna with your neighbors and family and colleagues.
This is true.
Yeah, next.
But
next
isn't there always air conditioning to the max in these gallery spaces? Are you not going to be freezing your tits? Excuse the pun.
It depends, honestly, because the British Museum, I don't recall having AC at all. I recall it being very hot and very unpleasant in summer.
Oh dear. Oh
So
dear.
I don't know.
Well,
It's
I
in the
won't be squeezing
Mediterranean.
my lemons anytime soon, so we shall swiftly move on from that, I think. Moving on, we go to something a little bit more serious now, talking about Russian artist Sasha Skochilenko, known for her anti-war activism.
Was recently freed. She was one of
Oh,
the
okay.
people who was freed in this
Oh, because of
hostage
the exchange.
exchange, right? So what do you want? Prisoner exchange, hostage exchange, political pawn. Take your choice of euphemism. Basically, as we all know, the Russian regime likes to use people as examples, as a way of sending a message of this too could happen to you, right? And so this was an artist who was caught up in that, who did not do very much at all.
Wasn't she doing something with price tags or something? There
It
was
was
like,
something like that. It was like
yeah.
switching out little messages or something for price tags. It was nothing that we would consider, certainly in the West, we would barely even consider that to be like political expression. It was more just simply like a tiny little fuck you, like the tiniest of middle fingers. But that's enough in an autocratic regime, right? Everyone must look the same direction. You must never be seen looking anywhere but we have told you to look.
Oh my. I mean, I think, well, I don't, what does one say here without being cancelled? It's a difficult one. What do you think, Christina?
Yeah. I think it's good to have the visibility of the consequences under the government's guise to opinions, because people are being arrested, fined, and sanctioned for their opinions in the West as well, and that's not in the news. So to highlight it in what is occurring in Russia and the exchange, um, I think that's important, because we may tend to focus on a specific country or regime, but it's within a lot of countries, a lot of institutes that it is occurring. So, and yet on every single side, everyone, or not everyone, sorry, on every single side, there's a notion that those who sacrifice their individual freedoms, they're doing it for good, to the majority. So it's very hard to comment on.
I remember seeing the story come through though, when they had the swap happen. I think it was only about 2 weeks ago, was it? And it was just the exchange, the seriousness of the exchange of the prisoners from who they released in Russia versus who they released in the US was vast. You know, and I thought that was ridiculous. I was just kind of like,
Well, because in the world of laws and reason, being a bad person is like being an assassin, right? Arranging for people's deaths. In the upside down world, that is the Orwellian nightmare, right? That's, well, actually, no. Doing an art project is worse than killing somebody. That's why we exonerate killers and send them to the front line so they can do it again, right? Like, it's a very different, it's not just a different value system. It literally expects you to like see the world in a very different way. You're simply an instrument of the state. And if you decide you don't want to be an instrument of the state's going to try to bend you to its will. And so I absolutely, my heart goes out to the folks that are still willing to do the work of saying fuck you, because that's what art is supposed to do. It's not just supposed to toe the line.
And my heart goes out to all those prisoners who are in Russia and who are wrongly imprisoned, you know, and I think even as something as minute as that, you know, I'm sure we've all done something that's been of equal potentially of equal criminality.
But even Russians protesting the war were imprisoned. I think it was 17,000 Russians opposing the Russian war. And we haven't heard what's occurred with them. So the lack of political dissent is absolutely shocking, whether it's an individual on the street or a Russian broadcaster. It's crazy.
It is crazy. But I think that tea is spilt, and we wish her all the best. And we will move swiftly along. So before we continue on, we'll just give you a little bit of an insight into Nua Collective. Nua Collective, a visual art community, is home to 20 artists and hundreds of their artworks with fresh work added weekly to our online collection at www.nuacollective.com. Here you will also find our Nua journal featuring articles and podcasts, which are also available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Our beautiful print publications highlighting our collaborative collections are available to buy, perfect for your art book collection. Stay posted to our social channels as we will be announcing a brand new collection launching very, very soon. Blackout, our international touring exhibition, is currently showing at the Green Sheep Studio in Thurles, Ireland until this Thursday. Check it out before it's too late. And don't forget, you need to follow us on Instagram and TikTok, like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss us spilling the RT in our weekly roundups every Monday. Moving swiftly on, folks. Josh, where are we going to next?
We are now going to Orange County in Southern California, where, for all of you who think going to flea markets and picking through old stuff can't pay off, it's just old broken down things. Well, this particular college student was wandering through and looking through some art prints and found, for $2, an original Marc Chagall.
Ah, there it is.
And people are like, this isn't a Marc Chagall. This doesn't look like outside scenes. But Chagall apparently did hundreds of these pieces like this early on in his career using other kinds of materials, right? And so the dead giveaway was, on the backside, there was an actual listing from a New York gallery from back in the 1950s. And yet there it was for $2. Current value, $20,000.
Wow.
How's that for a find?
Wow. I mean, I'm jealous that he just has it. I wouldn't even sell it on. I'm obsessed with Chagall. I've only just been to Chagall's exhibition in Nice, and it's just incredible, his breadth of work. Yeah, I'm just jealous. That's all I am.
Spend more time picking through old stuff, I guess, is the moral of this story.
Be more thrifty. I mean, wouldn't you like to have that in your house? I mean, I wouldn't even sell it. And I'd probably appreciate in value too, now the fact that that's had this story with it.
Sure, I would think so. But this student said, like, I bought this, I like this, I bought it because I liked it. I have no intention of selling it. I want it in my life, which I think is the most appropriate response, right? I think the original reaction is, oh, you got a great find. Well, I only got a great find if my intention is to sell it in that way. There's another kind of way of thinking about it as a great find, which is I found a piece from a master painter and it's mine now, right? Like,
absolutely,
that's a great find too. It has nothing to do with what someone would pay for it.
It's very revealing on intentions and prioritizations, everyone's reaction to it, really.
Yes.
Because some people may not have even considered some of the responses to the story. And so you're getting a very varied set of opinions.
Absolutely. And I think elsewhere in auction worlds, we go to one of the most iconic pieces of costume in film history to add to our film collection of things that we seem to be finding.
And I just want to be clear here. This piece isn't even what sold highest at this auction. We've talked before about how there's a cadre of collectors out in the world, right? They don't just collect art pieces. They collect unique and individual things. Mm-hmm. So in this case, someone paid $175,000 for the bikini that Princess Leia wore in Return of the Jedi. Right? That's the one that she was wearing when she was fighting Jabba, and she chokes Jabba to death with the chain, et cetera, et cetera. But there was a model of a Y-Wing from Star Wars, the very first film, that sold for over $1 million at the same auction. So the bikini's crazy, but $1 million+ for a ship, right, which essentially looks like just a grown-up version of a toy, is 8 times as much. That's the insanity here of collectors, of what collectors will pay for.
Absolutely mad. And it also showcases your incredible nerdy.
I think there's the idea of owning a part of history, and by owning it being a part of history. But also I think universally people are understanding the value of nostalgia and considering that also as an investment.
Sure. It's also that
Disney,
she's dead.
Marvel, absolutely. Marketing, Lego as well, really hitting the nail on the head with the broader public. So to be able to have that kind of exclusivity of a single item increases its value massively.
Sure. And she's dead. So the fact that it was Carrie Fisher, the fact that, right, no, she can't wear it again, right? I mean, that's just the reality is if you're a collector that's connected to someone who's famous, who's gone, is part of what adds to the provenance of the piece and ups the price.
100%.
True. Was it Hemingway who said every man has 2 deaths when he's buried in the ground, and the last time is when someone says his name? And this is a similar instance of that. There's owning part of that, being part of a collection of owners, really. It leaves behind a legacy, and we leave behind memories for the senses and the mind, and this is just one example of it.
I definitely think the collecting impulse is in some way an anti-mortality kind of impulse, for sure. Absolutely, right? If I just get enough stuff, I won't age. If I can just find the right combination of things. said the alchemists, right? It's the same human kind of humanness.
Mm-hmm.
There's an interesting thing you brought up there with the idea of aging. Lucas apparently said in regarding this costume, this bikini or costume, that it was a symbol of Leia, Princess Leia growing up, and it's quite a singular identifier of growth. And I think it was pertaining more for the audience's benefit rather than the storyline's benefit, because there's so many ways to show maturity, depth, and growth. And for him to say, "Oh yeah, it's to show that she's grown up," you think, "Oh, okay."
It's definitely it's definitely an older version of like what femininity is supposed to be and what that growth pattern's supposed to look like, right? In the very first Star Wars, they had to tape down Carrie Fisher's breasts so she would look less old. They wanted her to be as young looking as possible in that white gown that she was wearing all the time. So they literally had duct tape across her breasts. And so now by the third movie, right? This is back in 1982, so it's the third movie at that point. She's supposed to be fully grown up, and some people would say, well, is this supposed to be suggestive of rape? Is this like, what is this attraction of the slug to the human female? There's all kinds of, I think, interesting and sort of not necessarily wrong interpretations that you can read into this, particularly in hindsight of 40 years later.
True, and as an actress, she was almost enslaved to the role because she had to lose a
Yes.
phenomenal amount of weight just to fit into this. So
Yes.
there's a very restricted path, and while they're on the topic of that kind of enslavement to in the storyline, there is that kind of obligation or pressure, maybe.
Yeah.
That's
And
not
apparently
very
she
much.
lost too much weight. She lost too much weight. And
Yes.
so it was then uncomfortable. And because I guess she took it too seriously, what the studio said to do, which is from other stories of other female actors, that's exactly the kind of pressure that many of them have been placed under.
Mm. It is stressful though, isn't it? You know, trying to have to think about having to be what they want you to be, and then having to go through all of that pressure in order to achieve that. But I feel that the sexiness has come right through this episode, and unfortunately, it's not going to be as sexy when we go to the rocks in Stonehenge. So let's move swiftly over to the UK now, where we are looking at what the Labour government are now saying about the wonderful Stonehenge
Talk about a weird
historical
kind of
site.
story. Now, it's been a couple decades since I was last at Stonehenge. I have to admit that. But I recall there being some kind of under walkway that you walk through and then rose up into the stone area, right? And so they're talking about somehow replacing that with something even larger that would be a tunnel and then this whole overpass kind of thing. And they've just killed all that because of the austerity budget that has now been introduced in the UK. So I guess for some people, they're very happy because now this isn't going to be changing the layout of the location. And other people see it as a problem because they wanted to make it more pedestrian accessible and hide some of the roadway near.
They had these big, massive plans to do. I think it billions worth to create this bypass for the tourists, I suppose, and for the accessibility to get to Stonehenge. This is just a diagram of what that might look like. But now, since the Labour government have come into play, that is now no longer the case. And I think what's interesting is that there are so many different perspectives on this now. One are like, why are you not preserving or showcasing our national heritage site or this international gem, I suppose, this international historical gem. And then the other side of it, though, people are saying that, yes, we're delighted it's not happening because of the damage that would have done to the site, even though apparently there's roads around it that are causing damage as it is. So maybe they just need to find an alternative solution overall. Maybe they just said, oh, we'll just throw loads of money at it and just this is the next best solution.
Also, will access increase appreciation? It might increase it will increase the amount of tourists, but will it increase I guess the appreciation? But also, there's an idea of preserving values, and with an ever-changing world, the high constant noise around us, lack of tradition, and sense of community and history as our landscape is changing. We can't even within our single lifetime plan for like what we learn when we're younger is different from when we're older. So to be able to preserve the values and even with the motorways around Stonehenge, you will get somewhat of an authentic experience, but it's irreversible if the construction occurs. Even if it's not authentic regarding other tourists and things like that, you're one step closer to what its original experience entailed.
Well, the reality is, if you really want to preserve sites like this, you wouldn't allow access to them, right?
Yeah.
In the world of 21st century, we can do virtual things. You can recreate in all different kinds of ways. But there's a tourist, i.e. an economic imperative.
Yes.
So we want people to come, but at the same time, we only want them to come so far. And we certainly don't want them to spray paint the damn objects with paint. Right. So it's just like this balancing of different things, because there's hundreds of millions of pounds that get brought into the local area every year by people coming over to this place. Otherwise, why would you go there? It's flat and there's nothing else going on.
Yeah.
Right. Like, it's not really a tourist place in the sense of let's go to the beach and hang out. It's an interesting site, anthropologically speaking,
But
that we've turned into a spectacle.
True. And looking at illustrations that have been mirrored elsewhere, in Vietnam, in Ho Chi Minh, the tunnels, they've been expanded by about 20% for tourists to be able to go through.
Right.
Rather than, and so it's becoming commodity rather than the authentic experience. Yeah. So I'm cautious about where that line is drawn, and I don't think a single person can articulate that.
No.
Well, I can say certainly in California, where so much of this place has been turned into a spectacle for tourism, and then you're forced to live inside of it, right? That it's not fun. It's kind of like being in a glass bubble, and you're forced to live as the tourists are living, as opposed to how legitimate locals would be living. Wow. And so I don't know that would ever happen out in where that particular monument is located, but I do think that like we build cities around many of these things, right? Like, because it's such an economic incentive that one starts to wonder, as you just said, how much of this is original in the first place, and how much has become like almost like a simulacra, a nostalgic recreation of something that never was in the first place, so that we can bring tourist dollars in, even though it's not really the legitimate experience that it was.
It's almost like destroying it to sustain it. It's
exactly.
You just can't get right entirely.
It's bizarre. It is bizarre.
But like, surely with engineering at its greatest height now, and where there's so much innovation, that surely they could come up with some sort of solution that would achieve all of the above.
Probably, but it's going to cost a lot.
Yeah. True. Speaking of engineering, there's a... Oh, sorry.
No, go, Christina.
Go.
Oh, I was just going to say, speaking of modern day engineering, there's a wonderful bridge in Dublin that rotates on 2 access points for ships to come through. And infamously, it was recently revealed that when the officer was behind the construction and the engineering of this bridge relocated, they lost the only remote control to open the bridge for 4 years, and it was no one knew about this until I think a couple of weeks ago. So don't put too much responsibility on engineers. They didn't make a second remote control.
Oh my goodness! And there, look, we got a bonus. We got a bonus item today, Josh. That's ridiculous.
That's crazy. Absolutely crazy. So I think the tea is spilled on that. Why don't we hear about you, Christina, and what you're working on?
Great, yeah. Happy to go into it. So what you're looking at here is part of a series of paintings that observe the use of materials and the in situ, or the environment in which they're created. I'm using the environment to create the works, and it's about capturing something intangible, the moment in time. And with that, I mean that the rain, the wind, it's all so temporary, and yet it's used to influence the momentum, the shape, and the direction of the spray paint. With that, they're also painted outside, so it's all time-based, building up the layers, going back and forth between. Well, thankfully I live in Ireland, so it rains quite often, so these pieces are made quite possible. But while painting outside, I print the canvas into the foliage, almost like a timestamp, another layer of symbolism towards the idea of capturing that location in that moment. And and even when the painting is considered finished, it continues to age because let's say the shelves of rain, which are captured with the spray paint, they crack over time. The layers underneath are revealed, and the materials age and discolor as well. So when you bought the piece, you're buying a piece of that moment, and you're watching it change, and it's unpredictable, and that's what I quite enjoy about the piece. At the moment, I'd like to go back to further divulging this and further exploring this. But living up in Dublin at the moment, finding the space to spray paint outside in the grass might prove tricky. But it's certainly something I'm very passionate about.
It's really cool. I'm loving the markings though as well on the top as much as the more kind of contrasting ones below. It kind of does give that feeling that you are in a field, or that has that kind of grass feel, or that the ethereal kind of
So the
engaging.
materials, as each printing process occurs, I don't know what will stick, what will stay over time, or in the moment. So it's quite an interesting process, and you have to hand over control every time I create a new layer for a painting. You don't know where the colors will go or the direction of the rain.
That's very
exciting. Have you considered other kinds of substrates, like metal, that would actually change as well reactively to the environment?
I worked a lot with metal in the past, large sheets and bending metal. I quite enjoyed the idea of questioning the physics, and I think metal was a great way to illustrate the landscapes or explore the landscapes contradictions. So, for instance, I had a sheet of metal, and rather than, let's say, that represented the sky, and so I'd be bending the sky, and I'd be inverting the sun to the sky. So the sky was gold and the sun was silver, and you'd be creating like a sky that was bending a sun, which was an object at the time, a metal object that would be casting a shadow. So just playing on the ideas of the perceptions.
Cool, totally. We've got a load of works here for you to see, everybody. There's this piece here as well, which I thought was quite interesting. And is that central point, is that white spray paint, or is that reflective?
That's a reflection. This was kind of like a dancing in the deluge. So I was trying to a limited sense control where the rain was moving, so you can see a distinction of contrast of techniques.
Very interesting. It kind of reminds me of Goldsworthy in a way, because of the allowing the environment and the idea of that a piece is a process as opposed to like a finished thing. You have to let things happen in the process of letting go, which I think is a really interesting and powerful kind of concept for makers.
I like the philosophy behind it, and I don't think a lot of us exemplify that in our lives. It's so hard to let go of something, and we are so attached to certainty. So in the painting, that's why I also really enjoyed the painting process of this.
Yeah. Here's another piece that you have, which is really cool. I really like this one. I think it kind of has that kind of spatial feel, and we were looking a lot at the exoplanets recently, and I think this kind of reminds me a bit of that.
Is that on canvas?
Like that episode. It is, and it's very textured. The shadows you're seeing there are created by the direction of the spray paint, so it is protruding.
Cool. Yeah, no, it's very cool. And just one final more piece as well that we have, which is a little fierier, and that red is definitely coming through there. But that's also is quite cool too.
So how long is a typical making process for one of these? Obviously, you have the direct time of application, but then you also have the aging out period. So what for you does that kind of period look like?
For me, well, first I'll start off with the palette and the choice of palettes, and then the first layer will be laid down, and after that, it's more the finishing process. It occurs sometimes when I visit the client's home and I see that the piece has changed since I handed it over or shipped it. So for me, it's more it has its own agency, but for me, it's finished when it leaves my realm, and it takes on a life of its own after that. So you can say it's never really finished, but it's more when it leaves my hands, my space, that I have nothing more for it, and it just takes on its own life.
But that does raise an interesting idea. I do a lot of work of giving art away, and part of that is I don't necessarily know where it ends up or like what the
Yeah.
final resolution is, right? And so, do you try to keep track of the pieces, or is it just that a client you sold a piece to let you know, like how much do you know about those changes as they continue to happen?
Not much. So I have been informed by clients. Most I don't actively seek out the contrast of how it's changed over time, but through clients, it's quite interesting. They say, "Oh, new colors have come through from um, the shapes of the shells, like they crack under shipment when it's shipped, or they're distorted from light tinting." And so I find this out later. And while I am building up, I am conscientious of the fact that maybe once the shells of rain maybe break, or um, are in some way even destroyed, I'm conscious of what might appear underneath or what color might appear. So I think contrast storytelling, throughout storytelling, contrast is pivotal, and so I'm conscious of that when I'm picking my palettes.
That's been really cool, and it's been really wonderful looking at your work up close, Christina. And don't forget, everybody, you can check out Christina's work at nuacollective.com/Christina Geoghegan. So do check that out along with everybody else's artworks. And do check us out on our social channels too. Josh, where are we going with our social streams?
Remember to like, share, send to friends, subscribe. What do I always say?
We
Fear of
need
missing
three
out.
people. And the
Episode
three people.
14.
Don't forget the three people. You're
That's
losing it,
right.
Josh.
Well, it's been a week. Send to
It's been a
3
week.
people. Let 3 people know that they've got to follow us.
They
We've
do.
got to grow.
We've
We've
got
got
to
to
grow. We got to
grow.
grow. And make sure you can follow us across all of our social channels. And do follow Christina too. And stay in touch with all of her exciting new works that are coming up on Instagram and everywhere else. And Christina, you have a website too that we will link in our bio. So that's all we have time for today. Thank you, Christina, so much for coming on and joining Josh and I. Thank you. Super, super, super.
Thank you so much. I really appreciated it.
We've
Thanks for
had
having me.
we've had a great time talking to you. Make sure, everybody, that you do share this with all your friends and let everybody know. That's all for now, folks. Until next time, do spill some more tea. Bye bye.
Bye.